We are happy today to talk more about that, delivering innovation, and do that with a panel that's fully qualified in a variety of ways to do just that. The panel itself, collaborating to drive innovation, has a set of panel members representing a whole host of type industries, size industries, and an array of technologies. All of them interested in doing just that, delivering innovation for their companies. Our panel lead is, I think, ideal for what we're talking about this afternoon. Mr. Wallace, Stephen Wallace, has served in a number of roles at DISA since 2010. Has been a technical director of its development and business center since 2017. He came to DISA from CSC, Computer Science Corporation, where he worked to build a variety of enterprise-class collaboration systems and tools, identity management, and authentication systems for the federal government. Ready to lead our panel and make introductions. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Stephen Wallace.
All right, thank you all very much. When they first asked me to do this, I wasn't quite imagining this forum. This is quite the intimate room that we have here. So let's start off by talking about innovation, right? We in the IT world, we love our buzzwords. Innovation is certainly becoming one of those buzzwords. We'll also try to work in other buzzwords, SDN, cloud, cyber, anything else, just to keep the conversation going. So throughout history, there have been a lot of good innovation work and collaboration done between industry and the government. We wouldn't have made our way to the moon if it hadn't been for the collaboration between those contractors and the work at NASA. So things like smart cards have given way to credit cards with chips embedded in them. So there's been a lot of good work done over the years. So the idea of innovation between government and industry is nothing new. So what we have here today is we have a panel of 5 professionals here. I'll start down at this side with, I won't call you doctor, I promise.
Thank you.
Dr. Jennifer Yates. She's the Assistant Vice President for Inventive Science, Leading Network and Service Quality Management at AT&T Labs. I've got Doug Cate to her right, who is the Acting Chief Technology Officer at the Defense Intelligence Agency. I have Michael Chung, the Head of Solutions Government for Bugcrowd. I have Jeremy Corey, who's the Chief of Cyber Innovations and Assured Identity at DISA. And then finally, I have Keith Johnson, who is the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Engineer for Leidos Defense and Intelligence Group. So we're going to keep this pretty free flow, but we've got a few canned questions that I'll be asking the panel, and then eventually we'll turn it over to the audience and try to get some questions out of you and of the panel. Realizing that we are standing between you and happy hour, we'll try to keep this moving pretty well. All right, so the first question for the entire panel here, whoever, just jump in when you're ready. How does your organization promote a culture of innovation within its ranks? Right, we can talk a lot about innovation. It isn't going to be a handful of individuals within a given org, but how do you build that culture of innovation so that you deliver to your either mission partners or customers?
Mind if I take that?
Sure.
Okay, so I come from AT&T Labs. Innovation is in our DNA, dating back to the original patent for the phone with Alexander Graham Bell. But we have to keep it at the forefront of everything we do. And my organization's motto is innovation with impact. On everything we do, from the people we hire, to the projects we select, to the people we work with inside the company, outside the company, to then how we deliver on projects, we always ask 3 key things. We ask, what's the innovation, what's the impact, and who are we collaborating with? Innovation is no good unless we can have impact, really. It's one thing to go away and create things, but we really need to know that what we're creating is useful and is going to change the world as we know it in some way, small or large. And if we want to actually innovate with impact, achieving that means we need to collaborate with people who can use our innovations. One thing I've learned over the years through trial and error is that reality is far more complicated than I can sit and invent in my own little office. And so we get out there, we ask what the problems are, what the really hard challenges people are facing with, and then we go from there to innovate.
Okay.
So for DIA, we're in a unique situation. Number one, I would say that we recognize that the threat is very different, and we are not well positioned today to be able to compete with our adversaries. When we have to be able to write a 100-page requirements, functional requirements document and go through the acquisition process, and so there's a recognition, at least for the group that I lead and the CIO, to say, look, we have to do better. We have to start understanding where are those opportunities. How do we grow an organic cadre of folks who understand how to create capabilities in a very rapid and sustainable way? So we've been working with a larger IC intelligence community group of folks to introduce in really a training program to start with. How do we get to our people? The CIO has basically charged us with start with our new hires. All of our new hires are onboarding into the CIO organization, go through a 2-day innovation workshop. We teach some of Steve Blank and Eric Rees's lean startup methodologies. We begin to introduce new hires because they've not, frankly, been tainted by our own culture. And so we're hoping to seed some of that freedom of thought and capabilities and expression through tooling and providing them the environment to go and solve really, really tough problems in a kind of a new and different way.
So if I can just interject before we move on. So who are you sending through that iWorks training? Is it everyone? Is it PMs? Is it?
So right now we're sending all of our new hires. So every month we have new hires that are onboarding to the agency, the CIO, IT professionals.
So every one of your IT new
Everybody's
hires.
going through it. And so we give them basically a 2-week core curriculum. We teach them about DevOps. We teach them about our core ITSM processes. And we give them a 2-day lean startup kind of workshop. Then we put them into an environment before they go to the workplace. We put them in an environment, collaboration space in essence, to work on curated problems for 6 months. And that's their job. They learn these innovation methodologies. How do I drive out this uncertainty, right? How do I know what the customer really wants to build? If we build it, will anybody use it or will anybody care? And so how do we know that? And how do we do deliberate customer discovery? And so it's those kinds of methodologies that we're beginning to not just teach from an academic perspective, but then following on with 2 sprints of some problem statement that we've curated for them to work as a team.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I think for Bugcrowd, innovation is at the core of what we do, especially having our headquartered in San Francisco, kind of the epicenter of Technology Central. We promote events like hackathons. Our engineers often, after hours, huddle up and discuss new ideas and new ways to deliver products. But I think more importantly, from a cultural standpoint, we promote empathy to the customers that we serve, as well as the empathy towards our 80,000 hackers that we promote for crowdsourced hacking. So innovation doesn't necessarily mean adding new technology, but at our core, it really is customer empathy and really delivering what the customer needs, what they want, and what will make them successful.
Thanks. Chairman?
So being from the same agency, Steve, you can probably guess exactly what I'm going to say. Being mindful that my leadership is also here in the audience, so I'm not going to throw them under the bus or anything. But no, really, in DISA, I think we do a really good job in getting our top leadership down to influence and drive some of the strategic objectives of our director. Admiral Norton has this Road to Innovation objective, and by putting that in literature and getting leadership on board and trying to drive new ideas into addressing gaps that currently exist, we focus on cyber innovations, so much of it is defensive cyber operations. where we want to spend most of our focus on. But much of like what Jen had mentioned earlier, it's reaching out to academia, these bright minds that are coming up with new ideas, trying to apply use cases that we know, having our experiences helping the warfighter, as well as running our team members through I-Core training, what we call it, and that circles around Eric Esri's lean startup methodologies. We try and apply those methodologies of failing fast, doing rapid prototyping of new technologies, which is almost unheard of in some spaces in the government because we all are familiar with the acquisition process and how that could be lengthy. And so that's one of those, maybe it's an artificial barrier, but maybe it's just a challenge that we try to address in bringing in these small startup groups with maybe innovative solutions that could potentially address these address these gaps quickly and quickly move on to the next target. You also mentioned, Jen, about being able to identify the problem clearly and validating it. And that's something that we continuously work on. We spend numerous hours focusing on problems. What is the root cause? What problem are we really trying to get after? It's not always about technology. And so really socializing that across the agency, getting our team members, and many of them here sitting up front, is getting them into meetings across the organization from different directorates, finding out what potential problems may exist and where we can help.
And Jeremy, keying off your comment there, at Leidos we define innovation as implementing new ideas with business impact. So those don't have to be technology, right? They could be people, process, they could just be connecting dots. Small innovations can lead to big results. And so we start with that as our definition at Leidos of what innovation is. We also, another key area in how we promote a culture of innovation is starting with the first line leaders and having them encourage innovation within their team cells, because as we've seen as we work through our programs and activities, just the team concept and promoting positive collaboration on the team that knows the mission and the impact that they can provide, and encouraging them to come up with new ideas and then try them and fail fast is really important. We also have training. We have an innovation awareness course that we run periodically that, for one thing, for instance, again, just reemphasizing some of the concepts that were made. One of the areas is how do you reframe problems so that you elevate the problem, think about it a little bit differently, because sometimes we get in a rut in our daily business, and to promote a culture of innovation requires sometimes just to think about problems differently as you come to work each day. We also run, just tactically, we run innovation challenges periodically. Right now we have an innovation challenge with our Australia group. Jen, I guess you potentially could participate given your Australian heritage.
Sounds good.
We also promote things like best technical papers, so we are always looking for ways just to highlight innovative ideas within our workforce, and just provide that extra incentive. Sometimes it's not much, it's not a lot of monetary value, but just enough just to make people aware that it's important. And so those are some of the ways that we promote that kind of culture in Leidos.
All right, thanks. So the next question is around the idea of coming up with these innovations within an organization, and everybody has innovative ideas, but if you're not careful, they quickly become just science projects, and ultimately there's no delivery of that innovation. So how does your organization prioritize innovative ideas, and then how do you make the decision to invest in the valuable ones? So anybody want to jump into the fire?
Start with me, we'll go down.
Go ahead.
We'll rotate around. So we first start just with the definition. Basically, innovation is implementation of new ideas with business impact. And so, starting with business impact, we evaluate innovative ideas on two axes. One is does it fit within our core competencies? So we define how we go to market with a set of core competencies that things like enterprise IT, cyber, software development, just mission operations. And so we look for innovative ideas that really have a support infrastructure within our technical core competencies. And then we also look at it from another axis, which is business impact. And so that can be on programs or in our pipeline. So innovative ideas, if they're not supported, can quickly die. I know we've probably all been involved with projects that looked like they had just incredible potential, but for a myriad of reasons, just they failed to gather the business impact that's needed to keep them going. And so we're looking for a virtuous cycle for for innovative ideas that can be self-sustaining and almost really throw off additional energy in the form of time savings, money savings that can then be reinvested into new ideas. And so business impact is important to us. We do that a couple ways. One, we do that through looking at just regular meeting with our business development folks and our program line officers to ensure that are we really meeting the needs of the business through existing programs or programs that we're trying to go after. And then we also hold quarterly reviews for our research and development activities with our line and business leaders to ensure that we're not getting off track. We've probably all been, again, involved in good projects that went on for a year, and then when we briefed them, we're like, that's not what we need anymore. So we try to avoid that by having much more regular communications with our line leadership. And so that's on me as the CTO to ensure we have that connection. And I get graded by how well we do as a business. Are we meeting our business objectives through technology? And so there's an incentive structure that's aligned there, and a communication structure that's aligned to ensure we're trying to really hit the right cycles and create that virtuous cycle for innovation.
So being that we report up to the 3-star, first let's be mindful of what our goal is at DISA, to be a combat support agency, providing direct support to the warfighter, national level leaders, coalition, and so that helps us prioritize some of these innovative ideas that come forward. We have a direct channel to our director, understanding what her objectives are or her top 10 priorities, and if we can align some innovative ideas to those, that also helps. We have a requirements analysis office, and while we don't dwell in requirements when we're coming up with innovative ideas or just coming up with ideas in general and experimenting, it's important, though, to reach across and have RAO assist us in a business use case, because what we find is a challenge of what we call a valley of death. After a prototype or a pilot completes, where does it go from there? Does that capability or solution ever see the light of day? And that's a challenge. So by having a requirements analysis office helping us, whether it's communicating with our mission partners who have voiced a need or a problem that we've validated, and having them, pulling them aside along with us as we do the experimentation, helping us understand how we could potentially offer this solution as an enterprise service or a solution in general to that mission partner to help a certain pain that they have. That's been key, and I think that's one of the best ways that we can mitigate what we'll call this valley of death and operationally transitioning new and innovative technologies into the Department of Defense.
For Bugcrowd, we're a small startup out of San Francisco, so we don't have the luxury of really not staying focused on our mission objectives or even our business objectives. So, we have a pretty strong product team that uses agile methodologies and really rapid prototyping and defining the business use case early on. I think that's an important element for any business, especially in software development, to be able to understand the business impact, and if it does make a successful impact, to expand on those features and functionalities. But we have a pretty good organization, a pretty good methodology of staying focused. I think that's one of the most important elements of choosing an innovation, is to stay focused. Oftentimes you can get distracted by different technologies out there. I think walking around the floor, I heard blockchain, AI, and cloud technology when it comes to cybersecurity. And oftentimes, those use cases really don't make much sense of the impact. Those shouldn't be used. But because we're kind of in a buzzword world today where blockchain now is a new innovation to implement, you can often get distracted. So for us, it's having a good product team that can stay focused to make those decisions.
At DIA, we go in with the operating assumption that there should be a big funnel to catch a lot of different ideas, because we believe that innovation mostly happens at the edge, and it's not all centrally managed, and so we really try to have a very low bar of entry, but then a very deliberate funneling effect, if you will, through a series of evaluations, and we apply some criteria to how do we whittle these down. And so once we capture a demand for an idea, we evaluate those, we triage those, make sure that it makes sense for us to even look at it, and then we present it to a Shark Tank. We have 3 criteria we've established for a Shark Tank, for a first phase of the Shark Tank. It's desirability. If we build it, will anybody really use it? Will anybody really care? The second criteria is feasibility. Is it technically sound to be able to attempt to do something like this? And then the last criteria is viability. Is there organizational buy-in, senior executive support, and strategic alignment to be able to undertake this? And so then that's just a simple decision to say, should we invest 8 to 12 weeks on a sprint to say, all right, let's take this to the next level. At the end of that 8 to 12 week sprint is a minimally viable product, an MVP. That gets evaluated to the second phase of another evaluation to determine if we should invest some additional money and resources to make sure that that capability, the MVP, can be refactored and applied, design standards, security practices, and get it to the next level before it goes to production.
How are you guys collecting innovative or ideas in general that?
So we have a Shark Tank pool. It's a cross-section of our organization, right? And so it's we've got people that are GS7s all the way up to SES, and then representing organizationally across the board. So it's kind of a full spectrum view of the organization.
So this funneling effect that you described, is it an organization, an innovative organization they call it, or innovation?
It's just a board that meets periodically. When we have enough demand to warrant standing up, to meeting, we do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So in our situation, we always start by talking to our customers. Those may be internal to AT&T or external customers, and our key is to understand what their biggest challenges are, because they are what should drive our innovation and our prioritization. So we talk to them, we understand what their issues are, and some of those come with really clear business cases. You could put a dollar value on or a customer impact associated with it. Some of those, and we'll take those and we'll go away and innovate appropriately. But what we're always looking for are those that have the big impact and that have clear technical challenges that they need us to solve. If there's no clear technical challenges, then there's other organizations that may be better off handling those challenges. So some issues do have big business impact that we can see up front, but others we have to kind of take on a bit of an instinct that yes, we can see a clear organization who has a problem now, but if we can solve this problem, then there are potential much bigger impacts to come. I can give you an example of one project like that. We had our Global Network Operations Center come to us and say, understanding what the customer impact of cell tower outages in the network is really challenging, and we want to be able to prioritize those big outages so that we're focusing not on the big outages from a network point of view, but on the big outages from a customer point of view. Because it really doesn't matter if it's big from the network, it's how many customers are impacted and how are they impacted. And they came to us and said, we think this may well be impossible. And that, of course, is what gets us going, right? That's a real challenge. So we went away, we actually had an intern in academia, one of our partnerships with academia, work with some of the people in my organization. And of course, they solved that problem. They prototyped it, and then they drove it through our GNOC group to make that the standard way that we now escalate all RAN outages that happen within AT&T. But because we created that, and we're now talking with all sorts of other people throughout the company, we saw that there's plenty of other opportunities. So something that we thought had a fairly finite scope of impact, by evolving that idea and continuing to let it flourish and evolve and building more and more partnerships, it's now integral to pretty much anything we do within the RAN in terms of any type of outage or any type of solution, and whether we dispatch vendors, etc. So what we thought was a fairly finite impact became a much, much, much larger impact as we saw that innovation grow. So sometimes we have to go with instinct as well, not just that strong business case on something we believe can really flourish.
So Jen, like from your comments, and I think Doug, you touched on this as well. Like we talk about, we kind of work in projects, and whether a 12-week sprint or 12-week projects for like an MVP, and even Keith. Like, what's the do you have a window of time that a project can live in your AT&T research or in your innovative pipeline? Like, do you guys have a timeline, like in Bugcrowd? Do you guys have you have a cutoff, and if you can't prove or you can't provide an MVP and you can't prove that this is a problem solver or the learning objectives haven't come to fruition, is there a cutoff point? How do you guys deal with that?
We do it at the end of the 12-week sprint. Right?
Okay.
Make a decision right there. If it doesn't look like it's viable, it's dead. And it doesn't mean we can't learn from it later. There may be another relevant use case that we can apply to down the line. But
Okay.
For us, it depends, right? So some are, if they're customer driven, there's a milestone that we have to meet. So if we don't meet a milestone that would enable us to insert that capability or that new innovation into, let's say, a system that's going to be moving ahead, then we kill it. Sometimes it's budget driven, so we say, okay, we're only going to, it may not be time, it may be budget, where we're saying we're going to allocate a certain amount of money and see how well it matures, and then we'll go from there. Because sometimes, at least from my perspective, in this market right now, we're kind of people limited. In some ways, right? And so I could give a budget to a person and say, I want you to do this for 2 months, but it may not be the right person, right? Because innovation, it really takes that right combination of people to make a lot of progress. And so I'd rather almost wait until I can get the right people freed up to address that problem, because the probability of success is just a lot higher. Now, sometimes you don't have that luxury, and so you're always balancing that, but some of those, so it may not be a time thing, it could be a budget or a people thing, and so those are things that kind of are in our equations for how we kind of assign milestones and timelines.
So actually, I've had some interesting experiences on my career where often the challenge is finding the right timing for an innovation.
Yeah.
And the right problem. So you may start over here thinking you've got a good idea for such and such, and find no one really cares. But that same general idea over here, maybe 2 or 3 years later even, might be a killer app, where all of a sudden you're solving a problem that no one knows how to solve with something you had a while ago. So I wouldn't say kill an idea, maybe put it on ice, or just slow it down a bit. But I think it's really about timing. It's about the right person with the right problem at the right time with the right solution.
That's good.
Okay, thanks. So to the government folks that are up here, how do you engage industry to evolve ideas and deliver innovation, right? We often can't do it alone. So how do your organizations work with industry from the start of a bright idea to the delivery of a capability? So Jeremy?
So we have a slogan in our office, and it's get out of the building. That's the first rule, right? If you're in the building and you're not meeting with our industry partners, I mean, that's key. Because those are where the ideas are. Go to academia. So we have a circuit where we run and talk to different universities. A lot of it's for talent acquisition, looking for folks that may want to do government service, whether it's through an internship or become a career federal civil servant. But at the same time, it's tapping into these academic institutions, labs, or like I said, industry partners. I've talked with Mike. I ran into him at RSA. Doug, I've seen you before. I know you work for a federal agency, and Jen, talking to AT&T as well. But these types of engagements, the symposium, these are these engagements that we really can cultivate those relationships, whether it's beginning a relationship or discovering something new out on the expo floor.
I guess for us, I want to answer this carefully. We try to schedule at least once and possibly twice a year. We do an East Coast and a West Coast tour, and we focus on trying to be very granular in the kinds of problems and vendors that we think that can help us solve with some of the most pressing problems. And we take a group of senior and frankly not so senior staff out to just have conversations. And we've had, some great feedback from companies that help us, and oftentimes we'll realize, you know what, we maybe even own some of this software, but we're only applying a fraction of the capability that we already own. Well, if you just added these 3 features we just published, and if you could apply those in this way, And so we get a lot of insight in that way as well.
Okay. And then for the industry folks, how do you present your ideas to the government? What forums do you use? What are you using to get to the government folks, get to the right government folks?
So as Jeremy said, you're trying to get out of the building. So we're trying to get out of the building too. So I'm wondering where we're supposed to be meeting. So we do try, primarily, try to introduce innovative topics on our existing programs. So we have lots of programs with DISA and all the other major agencies for our government. And so we don't want to wait to withhold innovative ideas for the next program. We want to try to introduce as quickly as possible into the existing program. So we're always striving to introduce new ideas, new innovations that could help our customers achieve their mission better, faster, cheaper in those programs. We also request technical interchange meetings with our customers. Could be research labs like the DARPAs, the IARPAs of the world, Army Night Vision Labs, other research organizations for more far-reaching innovative topics to ensure that we're spending our internal R&D problems on our dollars on the programs and problems that our customers are really focusing on as well. And finally, industry conferences like AFCEA are another great way to show selectively some of our innovative topics without revealing too much IP, but engaging industry and engaging our customers in a little bit more open forum. I don't want to diminish the collaborative nature of forums like this that give us an opportunity to kind of share where we're going, get that feedback, and maybe even engage some other industry partners along the way.
Outside of stalking people on LinkedIn, no, I had the fortune of working at the Pentagon last year and making that switch from Silicon Valley, and so having the relationships, I really am fortunate to be able to have the contacts that I have. But if it wasn't for organizations like AFCEA or meeting people like Jeremy from DISA and some of his peers, I wouldn't know where to start, right? The acquisition channels are confusing, and it's difficult for big companies to get their leg in and have those meetings. I can only imagine how difficult it would be for a small company. So, working with DISA and speaking with them the last couple of weeks have been quite pleasant, actually, and having those real conversations have been fortunate. But, attending these events like AFCEA hosts, without these types of events, I wouldn't even know where a small business or startup would be able to start, because those opportunities don't exist outside of AFCEA.
So coming from a large corporation, we actually have a group, AT&T Government Solutions, that interfaces in with the government and provides that interface in with us internally as well. So they spend a lot of time investing in the relationships with the government and in understanding the challenges that they want to see addressed. And they also spend time understanding what we're doing internally that may well be able to be something that could be presented to the government. And they kind of provide that bridge that enables us to then present ideas, maybe do prototypes, even field trials with the government. But we also have huge collaboration programs with academia. And given that academia has a large amount of funding coming from the government as well, it kind of becomes a three-way partnership where we also get involved in some of the NSF funding decision-making coming from industry and even helping academic partners request funding and then partner in those actual collaborative efforts with the government as well. So kind of have multiple different avenues, our research avenues with academia and also the business avenues through AT&T Government Solutions.
Okay, thank you. So, to the industry folks, what could the government provide to industry to better drive innovation? So how can we better convey to industry, where we need the innovation at, where are our challenges, what can we do?
Me go first? Okay. Just a couple of recommendations. One is just to make sure you just stay at the mission level. Sometimes
You can look at him too.
well, you're right here, yeah. So sometimes when we're engaging with government, there's some desire to pick winners in the commercial market and picking various companies or technologies. And as the innovation cycle continues to accelerate, I don't think anybody can really pick winners. So the more you can help just stay at the mission level, identify the problems, and scope those problems, that helps us understand where to vector the ecosystems that are being developed. Another recommendation is to, as much as you can, try to stay out of the framework wars. Think of just one example like big data or containers. There's just tons of money going into these frameworks by commercial industry. I mean, I'm just thinking of the container frameworks and Kubernetes and the ecosystem of security and DevOps kind of capabilities, and now Kubeflow, which is basically a machine learning framework on top of Kubernetes. These ecosystems are changing so quickly that if we're trying to pick a framework and try to use it too low in the stack, we're likely going to get overrun by new technologies. And so I just recommend let's let the frameworks kind of be what they are and abstract as kind of the mission from that. And the last thing would be to ensure that you have innovation in the criterias for the acquisition side. So on the Section M, what I like to look for is there an innovation evaluation criteria, something that we can get scored positively by coming up with innovative ideas, because that actually gets our solution architects, our good big brain thinkers involved with those proposals, those captures that can deliver that next gen capabilities to you. But if it's not there, it becomes very more difficult to insert that into our offers for you. And so making that clear as a scoreable criteria in Section M would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say, at least from a small startup perspective, I would say that I think it would be beneficial, and I don't know if DISA does this already, but make the roundtables out to Silicon Valley, right? Go visit the big companies. I know Google has programs where they allow, internships at their organizations to be able to spend 3 months there, understand the problem sets, and see what products or services that they have that can service to you guys. But at the same time, I would say also visit the small startups, right? A lot of these VC-backed startups have really innovative ideas, and a lot of them really deliver great products and services that big companies can leverage, but I think government could be able to leverage some of these as well. It would be interesting to see if some of these agencies had funding to acquire some of these talents, right? I think that would be an interesting model. And from a business perspective, if there was budget to acquire some of these startups from VC-backed companies and to integrate them into their organization, for better or for worse. But I think really visiting these companies, partnering with these smaller companies early on would be beneficial, because there's a lot of great stuff coming out from these two guys in a garage type of startups.
So one area I'd like to see continue to focus is looking for where there's synergies. So a lot of the problems that big corporations face are probably very similar, at least from my experience, with what the government's also facing and trying to solve. And so a lot of the work going on can actually be synergistic and leveraged across the both. One of the things that we've really focused on in recent years is actually going into an open source mode, where we're actually sending some of our core innovations out into the industry for commercial benefits for us, which also benefits the industry, and maybe that's an area where we could actually grow some partnerships. So for example, we've got this Open Network Automation Platform, or ONAP, that was a collaborative open sourcing effort between AT&T and other corporations. There's now 60 plus different members involved in that, and that's a general innovation platform that many people can innovate on and benefit from. And so that could well be just one of many examples where we could actually partner closer together to see a win-win for everyone.
Okay. So, to anyone who wants to take this next one, how are you leveraging innovation within your orgs to change the way that we approach cybersecurity, right? So we've all got a very long history of having an issue pop up, let's throw another box in line, let's throw another box in line, and next thing you know, you've got seconds of latency between the time that the packet enters the network and it hits the endpoint. So how do you approach that innovation with respect to cyber? I mean, so Jeremy, why don't you lead off from the cyber directorate?
This is what happens when your boss is the moderator.
And performance appraisals aren't quite done yet, so let's see how this goes.
Purposely holding mine back. I'm sorry, what was that question again, Steve? I'm kidding. So how do we fold innovation into cybersecurity, right? That's a good question. In a particular project that we're working on right now, and I'll speak from a specific example, is we're focused again on defensive cyber operations, where this particular project is looking at multi-factor authentication, but there's a fundamental understanding of what is it that we're experimenting with and the problem that we're trying to solve. And so to summarize, is we all know a particular secret to access some type of information, whether it's a key, whether it's a PIN, whether it's a password. The experiment that we're working with here is the fundamental shift from knowing something to having a set of factors, whether they're biometrical, whether they're contextual, environmental factors, together that can be fused together to form essentially a highly complex access control system. So it's no longer knowing something or knowing that secret, but having an access control system to make the decision whether or not you should be able to access a resource. And so the question here, it goes back to, well, how do we fold innovation in cybersecurity? There's always been an ongoing challenge of, if I add another box into my environment, if I put another agent on my host, you have this balance of usability and security, right? And so in this particular experiment, we're really going after usability and ease of use. How can I allow our enterprise and our users to have ease of use and access to credentials, in this case, to continue working, to access resources. So it's that working on that balance, and that's where we're applying innovation in this particular experiment, is that usability and security balance.
Yeah, we're taking a similar approach with, you mentioned the Valley of Death, and it's really is where we've learned that we have to start building security in at the front end, even if it's just an MVP that goes in the trash at the end of the day. If we're beginning to leverage a modified DevSecOps pipeline to make sure we're using some of those tooling. If you're familiar with the RMF process, and where we can adopt some of those common controls, then we can get ahead of the game in terms of the security, because it is really all about how do we transition from that experimental phase into the operational phase.
Okay.
And then connecting what Jen so concisely summarized, innovation is applying, if I get this right, and I like this, applying the right person to the right idea at the right time, right? So what we're trying to do in cyber innovation in particular is we work with across federal government, civil, defense, intel, as well as commercially in some of the regulated industries like banking and energy, where we're delivering cyber expertise, people, processes, implementing new technologies, as well as doing that internally as well. And so a tendency, though, is sometimes to stovepipe those people and not let them communicate too much, just the way any large organization works. So we're actively working to cross-collaborate, connect the dots between what we're doing in various domains so that we spread that wealth of knowledge and expertise and learning that's going on. We do that in our IRADs as well. So for our internal research programs, we're applying, when we're reviewing those, we're looking to bring in people from other domains that have cyber expertise. Maybe it's a little bit different, but that can look at that problem differently. Also, we rotate people across to ensure that we're never growing stale. I can't emphasize enough in cyber, as well as the other disciplines, but I think in cyber in particular, it's about the people. It's about ensuring that, because the expertise that we're gaining working problems can be applied in so many different ways, and it's taking the great people that we have in rotating or giving them, maybe just not in a new program, but just in a little different job, they can apply what they've learned into a new problem that maybe others have looked at differently, like reframing the problem like we were talking about earlier, in order to just derive that new insight. We don't view necessarily, again, like you talked about, Steve, it's not like just adding a new box. It's not, that's the tendency, but what we see is innovation in cyber is how you take the smarts and the people that have been working that problem and letting them collaborate. And what they'll do is they'll take that information flow and they'll connect it in a way that drives faster response times. And it's really more of a process thing, just getting the data and the knowledge to the right person faster. And so that's our goal, and whether it's internal research and development or folks on deliver on programs, is how do I make sure that they're not growing stale, but continuing to learn through rotation programs and applying the right oversight models.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll chime in there. So at Bugcrowd, our core competency is in the cybersecurity space. And in a couple years, we realized that there's going to be a shortage of about 3 million security professionals in North America alone. And so how do we address that problem? And we're thinking of innovative ways of rapidly deploying white hat hackers or solutions and services to fill that gap, right? So if you look at the context of the world today, the F-22 Raptor, one of the most sophisticated warplanes out there, has about 2 million lines of code, which is a significant amount. Any guesses out there what the 2018 Ford F-150, how many lines of code that has? Any guesses?
30 million.
6 million.
I have a $5 bill if anyone guesses correctly.
Are panelists eligible for that $5?
F-150 driver.
Potentially, no. So the latest Ford F-150 has about over 120 million lines of code, right? Wow. So think about that for a minute. Do we have enough security professionals for that? So we're thinking of innovative ways to address that problem, whether we're taking the human element, we're taking the product and services approach, but we are really putting our minds to the drawing board and how to address that. And that really takes a lot of creative sessions and close collaboration with the product team, probably different than the other companies up here and how we approach product development and deploying our services. But really there's filling the gap because there's going to be a significant problem. Private sector is dealing with this. If you haven't read the news lately, someone's getting breached every day. So, how are we going to address that? And that's what we're here to do.
Okay. All right. So those are all the pre-canned questions that we had put together for today. So I've seen a lot of you out there on your cell phones, so I'm sure you've been busy entering in a bunch of questions to the team. All right, we ready? Go ahead.
First question, what is the most important factor needed for human collaboration to achieve innovation?
Panelists?
Communication. Building relationships
Yes.
with other people and communicating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to be so lame because I'm going to say the same thing.
I mean, that's
It's
the
key.
absolute
It's
best
like-
answer.
It's relevant, right? Like you touched a lot on like the emphasis of the right people at the right time,
Yeah.
right? It is. It's timing and the right talent, and the right folks in the room, and that may not be your smartest engineers. You got to have that right mix of folks, and so yeah, it goes back to having that right mix of folks and the communication between them.
To put a different spin on it, it's to remove the viscosity from the information flow, and sometimes that's just making sure that there's no barriers there that they're restricting information flow, and sometimes there's a incentive structure to encourage the information flow. So both ways. So first line leaders, again, making sure that they're incentivizing, that they're rewarding their staff for innovative ideas, and also that the communication structures enable that flow to get to the right people.
So if I might jump in too on that one, I went and asked one of my mentors about a year ago what he thought really led to a lot of the innovations in one of the places that I used to work at, and his answer was it was top cover, right? So that them providing the top cover, and frankly, in the government, nothing happens without funding, but it was that top cover and those people going after the funding that ultimately allowed the folks that were doing to be involved and to be innovative and to deliver. They weren't worried about what was coming down from above or potentially where the money was coming from. They were allowed to get their jobs done and deliver. All right, next question.
How do you educate or introduce a new technology or capability so that folks can clearly see the benefits or possibilities? Or how do you confront doubts and uncertainties?
I like to make them part of the process. So I like to make them part of the experiment. I think that's what you usually pull in whether they're tech savvy or not, but get them from the beginning and let them be a part of what is that experiment or that you're trying to conduct, what is that innovative idea that you're trying to prototype.
I would say, and I agree with Jeremy, have them part of the process and have that customer empathy. Anyone who's dealt with the Defense Travel System, DTS, knows all its pain points, right? There were a couple conversations a year ago that make, transposing all those features and functionalities into a mobile app would be innovative. And to me, that's not innovative. You're just throwing technology at an existing problem. And a lot of companies and organizations often fall into that trap. And again, if you know DTS, having it in a mobile app would probably make it twice as bad of an experience. And so you really have to stay focused. You have to have that customer empathy. And you have to include the customers as early on as part of that process.
So I completely agree with getting the customer engaged as early on as you can. I think that's the fundamental thing. But sometimes we're trying to introduce technology in there that does have some risk associated with it. And I think the best way to do that is to look at where there is minimal risk. Maybe from my point of view, maybe it's at the edge of a network in a small domain where you can have less customer impact if you're trying that, and run it in parallel. So for example, you can have a human in the loop giving an okay on when decisions are made, for example, if technology is going in and making changes to the network automatically. So I think by partnering with the people who are using your technology, you can find ways to build that comfort level by having them engaged in the early design, and then as you roll it out so that they have control until they're more and more comfortable with it, and let go of the control and let the automation take over.
Just one additional point is when I'm a technologist at heart, and so I've had to develop an empathy really for communication and the importance of communication. And so, sometimes we just hire a marketing person to talk with our technologists to say, okay, we got to boil this up, guys. We got to. What is the real impact here? You're not really speaking to at the customer's level or what they actually see as important. And so sometimes there's different skills. You have to take really smart technical folks and pair them with someone that can really either speak for the customer or at least communicate in a way that the customer will understand. And that's a way to really bridge the gap. And almost sometimes that is the most important aspect of innovative ideas, is bridging that gap between the technical innovation and how it can really help the customer in addressing it in the risk framework that speaks to them.
Okay, next question.
Given current budget constraints, how do you budget to sustain innovative solutions long term?
So at DIA, we've not solved that yet. We are working to create, in essence, what amounts to an innovation fund. So after that first 12-week sprint, the CIO has created an innovation fund, and it basically is a place where we can get that refactoring work done, get the security accreditation piece done, and at least through year one, so that, because fundamentally we're so structured, our acquisition and budgeting and programming systems are created around programs of record. So how do you create space from a budget perspective to be able to accommodate these new things is really, really hard. So I think the first thing is we got to have acquisition reform to help change that. But more practically, we've tried to create a fairly small innovation fund so that at least we can take care of year one costs, kind of out of hide in essence, and then if the usage and adoption is really there and it's really valuable, then we'll look to those customer stakeholders to budget beyond that.
Yeah, it's much of the same for us as well, Doug. So fairly new innovation office I lead in, and we are setting up a budget for the out years. And in the meantime, it's really trying to work with these programs of record who are the ones that have the budgets, right? And trying to understand where we can fold into their existing spend plans, and then working across the department. So whether it's our mission partners, the armed services, talking with them about maybe it's the same problem that they're having, right? That maybe the Navy's having the same problem as the Air Force is having, and we're trying to work together to solve that problem. So I think collectively, maybe that may help. In trying to have everyone kind of put in a little bit on this experiment, but being very clear about what those objectives are also help drive justification for money or for a budget to experiment with.
It's real easy to add a bunch of governance and bureaucracy around this thing, and then we defeat the whole purpose.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's the challenge.
I think from our perspective, it's really about believing that innovation is what enables the future. It's what's going to protect and create the future. But it's also about having a pipeline of innovations that are maturing and having tremendous business impact that essentially enable you to then go and have some longer term things that are more experimental, more risky, that are essentially going to be the future in as we go along. So really having that entire pipeline and really making sure that the value of the innovations that are more mature are really well understood is what's going to protect the future for the future innovations.
Okay.
Given the need for speed to implement innovation and sustain it, how do we innovate to practice when there are so many people and contracts gaps along the innovation to practice life cycle?
So if I understand the question correctly, we, at least for DIA, what we've done is we have historically been an organization that had a real heavy reliance on our vendor partners to do just about everything. And there's been a realization that fundamentally doesn't support this whole idea of innovation. It doesn't support the ability to respond to these very real threat vectors as well. So we have made a deliberate decision to start to build an organic, skilled workforce, a government-based workforce to help us to do some of that work. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
How difficult has that been to build that workforce?
It's a journey. We're still, yeah.
I'm with you. Talent acquisition for a workforce that can really move the ball on innovation and quickly. It's tough. That's a challenge ongoing. I think you're hearing it now from two agencies.
Yeah, I would say that, and I'm sure yours is probably, it's not only the acquisition of that talent, it's then the retention of that talent.
Right.
Yes.
Because this is a highly desirable field, and a lot of companies will come in and throw a lot of money at some of these folks once they get to a certain level.
I think it's also not just the people, it's also making sure that once you've got an innovation, you can actually find a path for that innovation to live long term, not to just create something and then let it drop. Coming from a research organization, one of our biggest challenges is how to make sure that we send it over to a development organization long term, where it will continue to live. Because you don't want to create something and then have it die, just because you didn't have the right partners later on. So building those relationships and the business understanding that that's a need, that we create that long-term program is vital.
In addition to the virtuous cycle that we talked about, sometimes there are innovations that they're just not ready yet. They're not going to make it, and so it comes down to the people, right? That there's got to be a champion that's going to take the innovation and potentially they may just work on it at night. They may work on their off time because some people, they love to work. They have a day job, and then they want to spend additional hours just working on that pet project that they really love, and we want to encourage that. We want to sustain that in ways that just enable that by giving them access to lab equipment or IT equipment, and enable them to continue to mature it or really just carry it through that valley of death until the timing is right. And so I think that's important too, as we not everything is going to make it through, and we don't want to kill it. But so the idea is, how can I incentivize a champion to just kind of care and feed for that until the timing is right?
Okay.
How do you promote innovation when some contractors place a higher priority on revenue over sharing ideas?
And what? What?
Revenue.
We
How
don't.
do you promote innovation when some contractors put a high priority on revenue and sharing
revenue.
ideas?
Can you ask that question again? I'm sorry. I heard revenue and I tuned out.
You don't hire them.
There's a good solution.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the most innovative contractors that I've worked with are the ones that aren't in it to come in there and sell their wares. It's pretty apparent to a lot of us in the government the moment that a vendor walks through the door, if they're there for the good of the DoD, the agency, the warfighter, or are they in it for the bottom line? It becomes apparent very, very quick. And the moment that becomes apparent that they are really just focused on the bottom line, I would say that most of us tune out, and that's the quickest way that we weed those out.
Yeah, I mean, just one I think example is maybe a commercial partner not introducing automation because they don't want to take bodies off a contract. Maybe that's a relevant example here. And I think for us, I'm constantly challenging our teams. We have to find ways to automate. Sometimes there's staff that are reluctant because they feel like they're not able. They may lose a job or something like that. But we communicate that we have retraining programs. We have other programs that they can go work. Let's not think about the short term. We need to think about the long term. The best for our customers is always the best for us. And so we want to align to our customers' priorities and deliver, whether it's an automation that might take people off because of redundancy or just a better service delivery experience now. That is fine. We want to do that. But at the same time, we have to take care of our people. And so we try to offer retraining, reskilling, or just other program off-ramps where they can go.
I would say conversely, oftentimes the vendor is happy and willing and desires to help us. And often there are cases where we either didn't build our contracts to allow them to help us.
That's
or
absolutely
some other
fair.
constraint.
That's the most frustrating part, is when you're hemmed in by contract language and both parties want to do the right thing, and you're absolutely right. Next.
What publications or analyst sources are your go-tos for innovative ideas?
Eric Reese, The Startup Way, and I'll let you guys, Value Proposition Canvas, Alex Osterwalder.
Eric Rees. Eric Rees' lean startup methodology is one of the most popular ones for our group.
For specific ideas, well, I mean, it can be through, so we have a very, very robust engagement process where we for vendors, so we talk across we have an ecosystem of vendors that we talk to. We also bring in, for instance, we bring in venture capital groups periodically, and we'll review a set of their portfolio companies that matches our technical core competencies as a way to understand where the startup funding is going, and then we look for ways to tie those startups either to an internal project or to maybe to a program that has its capacity to do that. Industry events like this, or more specifically in specific domains like software development or cloud. Those are great opportunities to learn kind of where it's going on. So ideas, honestly, are coming from everywhere. From people, from conferences, from just the web and news announcements. Google had their I/O event last week, and there's about 100 new ideas that came out of that one. So it's really constant, and so it's that funnel idea that you talked about, Doug. Is how do you capture all that and then sift it? Because I don't think it's the ideas that we're short of. It's the funneling and matching them with the people and the timing and the budget and the opportunities.
Can I add one more?
No.
Steve Blank's blog is a great resource.
Okay.
That was our final question for the panel. Now, please welcome Lieutenant General Bob Wood back to the stage to formally thank the panel on behalf of AFCEA and our audience.
Thank you, everybody.